Welcome to Hope Blooms, a podcast from the Early Pregnancy Loss Association.
At EPLA, we seek to support women and families suffering early pregnancy loss by providing resources, education, and community. It is our vision that no one suffers miscarriage alone.
Welcome back to Hope Blooms. I'm Maria Servold.
And I'm Emily Carrington. With us today is a special guest, Sara Ringle. She is the president and co-founder of Forget-Me-Not Baskets in Ohio. Welcome, Sara.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
We're really excited to have you on today. And I guess we'll just start at the beginning. Can you tell us both a little bit about the services Forget-Me-Not Baskets provides and how you got here? And I love your story. So can we just share it with everyone how you got to where we are today?
Sure, absolutely. So Forget-Me-Not Baskets provides bereavement items for families who've had a loss during pregnancy or childbirth. We work directly with hospitals and OBGYNs, not necessarily the end user, but we do have a space where people can come in and purchase things. We started in 2007, and I personally have not had a loss. I was from Tennessee, moved to Ohio, and I needed some friends. And so from that, I started a mom's group, and I met some wonderful women. And I just thought, we have a great network of women. It would be really good to give back to our community. And so I just kind of put the criteria of two things, just want it to be in our county and for women. And so we did a couple different things here and there. And one day I just called the operator at Worcester Community Hospital in Worcester, Ohio. That's where I gave birth to both of my children, my boys, and said, hey, what happens? Like, what do you do for families who have a loss? And she quickly redirected me a few times, but I stumbled upon Becky Yoder, who is actually still on our board, but she's the bereavement. She's now retired, but she was the bereavement coordinator at Worcester Community Hospital. She's like, oh my goodness, I was just in Akron, and I had at this bereavement conference, and I have all these ideas, but we just don't have any money. And so we kind of talked through things for about 30, 45 minutes. And then I did a lot of research to learn very quickly that there's not a lot of items or things for families. And so we put together this basket, and then we dropped it off at the hospital, not even knowing if it was going to be used. We just really wanted to try to focus on tangible remembrance items for mom. And so that was kind of like October, and then we were moving on to the next month, to the next thing. And about 6 weeks later, the hospital did call us back and say, hey, we use that basket, and not only that, can we have another one? And because of HIPAA, we never know who or when they're going to receive a basket. So I said, you know what, we'll put together two of them for you. And when you get down to one, you just call us. And from there, we stumbled upon an unmet need, and it took me about 5 years to even realize that.
So how many baskets do you give away now?
So just to kind of put it in perspective, the first 2 years we were around, we gave out 47 baskets. And so, but to date, from 2007 to now, I don't know actually this month, but we've given out over 9,100 and something.
Wow.
So this year alone, we've donated over 700.
Okay.
Wow.
Now, I presume you've expanded to more hospitals from that first one. So how did that happen?
Sure, absolutely. So how that happened is through a lot of community organizations, a lot of Sunday schools, other moms groups, just reaching out and saying, hey, are you here? And would say no. And so they're like, okay, well, how do we get you here? And so they actually would raise the funds to get us there. The second location we went to was in Pomerene in Millersburg, Ohio. And then Altman Canton reached out to us. And then we had another Sunday school class sponsor us in Ashland, Ohio. And then we kind of just sat there, and then we thought, we're in Wayne County, Ohio. And so we thought, you know what, we want to get into Oroville. And if we got into Oroville, that would cover all of Wayne County for us. And that's what was important. And we kind of just rode that wave, honestly, for years. I had another job, I had a career and things of sorts. And probably it was around 2018. And we're like, you know what, I either need to just dive in or hang it up, because it was just a lot. And I decided to dive in, and now we are in 68 locations. So mostly in Ohio. My husband's from Kentucky, I'm from Tennessee. So we're we're in a few places in those two states and just sprinkled around and a little bit in New Hampshire and, kind of the same thing, just Georgia.
So can you tell us a little bit about what is in, so you have your Forget Me, you have your basket. And I know you have some other things for early loss and for later loss. Can you tell me a little bit about what you offer and for which group, I guess?
Yes. So we started with just our basket, but then as we started going into the larger hospitals, working with Altman Canton, they decided, hey, let's do something a little bit different for those that have had an earlier loss because, having a clay, like the molds would to do handprints when they don't have the opportunity would only set them back, and that's not our purpose and our mission. And so let's find things that are appropriate for, different stages of pregnancy loss. And so we now have an early loss bag, and it's mostly in, you're going to find those mostly in ERs and in surgery centers, and then in all of our OBGYN offices. And then we have our late loss basket. Of course, that's going to be found more so in labor and delivery. With that, we also include a dad's bag. And dad's bag is separate. It used to be in with the mom stuff, but we found out very quickly that he doesn't go through mom stuff. And once we launched the dad's bag, it's been very well received because the dads are just, they can't fix things. They're often not as acknowledged as much as the mothers. And we just want to give them that sense of acknowledgement and support that they need as well. But we also know that, grief touches everybody. Nobody is left untouched or unharmed from that. And so we also have kind of a la carte items for grandparents and for siblings.
That's wonderful. You mentioned you started in 2006. We started in 2016, and we've talked a lot about how things have changed even in the last, what is it
5
now?
years. Yeah.
6, 8, 7 years.
Yeah, just in the understanding of loss.
Oh, right. And I had my first loss in 2014, and it's amazing, like in that last 5 to 10 years, how things have changed. But I'd love to hear your perspective on how things have changed in the last, 15 to 20 years here now. And I would like to also, I think, as we came in 2016, we've realized like there are these amazing groups like yours out there paving the way. And that's been, we're responding a lot to that. So can you tell us a little bit about what you've seen sort of over the last 15 to 20 years?
Sure. I mean, like I said before, you had the internet, no Instagram. I don't even know if I was on Facebook back then. Maybe. I can't remember. But so just not a lot of research.
Facebook was new.
Yeah.
In 2006.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, just finding the resources were really hard and things that are really meaningful to families, and just remembrance items. That was difficult, more so difficult. And what's happened, along the way and really paving. And I know that you probably had this just hardship of you call a hospital and say, hey, we have an organization that wants to help you get these things at your hospital. There is no cost to you. And it's kind of like, what is the catch? So getting into a location has been hard. And it's hard. It's much easier. It's still not always easy, but having free things for a location has gotten easier over the year because with social media and all just people having a platform to share their stories and become, be a part of groups, both private and public and everything. I think it's just also paved the way that people are starting to speak out, and also us organizations like yourself and ours going to these, hospitals and stuff and saying, here we have stuff, also allows them to now have things for patients. And it's starting conversations of like, this was really helpful and thank you. And in the depths of my grief, I can tell you that this was a wonderful experience and care that you gave me here because they're all walking away devastated. So to say that you can come away from this with a good experience because you were able to connect with the nurse and stuff. And so just more dialogue and more conversations have happened, I feel like, over the years. That's just made it easier. And so therefore it's like the hospitals are starting to see the importance of bereavement. You don't always think of bereavement when you think of labor and delivery, and pregnancy. And so I just think it's really important to continue the conversations and they have the tools now to be able to kind of have those conversations.
Right. And like medical professionals may not, every nurse in the ER, for instance, may not be trained to handle that sort of a situation. But then if there's this item that they know they have and they know when they can give it out, and it sort of, allows for that connection point.
Yes, it says all the things without saying anything at all. When there's no words that really can take the place of that anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Right. How have you seen sort of your community response to your organization as you've grown and gotten bigger?
It's been, it's everybody. It takes a long time, right? So we used to collect juice pouches, like Capri Sun pouches, for 2 cents a piece, and we had garage sales and Pampered Chef parties and Tastefully Simple parties, all of the things, and Applebee's dying to donate nights, all these things. But as more people came to know us and then understood our mission, boy, they have poured out with support. We almost have people come into our office every day, whether they're picking up elephants to sew or dropping off, blankets, or they're coming in to volunteer, coming in to purchase things for other friends and family. That's been huge. I would say the number one thing that's changed is, and it wasn't until 2020 that we got an office. And when we got an office, I just thought it's just because I just wanted it out of my basement.
Yeah,
and
we get that.
Allowed
we had the
people
same
to come in
problem.
and volunteer,
Yeah.
But when we got that office, it has just opened up so much because people are just like, "Who are you? What are you? Let's come check you out." And it's just amazing how many people have been touched by Forget Me Not, and and then come back and try to and want to give back. And we always say it's beautiful if you don't know who we are, because that means you haven't been touched. We'd love to share what our resources are, but more and more people are like, oh yes, I received something from you, or my sister did, or my children did. So it's been really, really nice.
Well, and the reality there, right, is that miscarriage has always been common. It's, I think as our services grow, we've sort of reflected lately on the sadness of that. Like, oh dear, these are 500 more deaths. These are 1,000 more deaths, because we find ourselves, we sent out 500 more kids. But at the same time, I do think there's room for those 500 losses were happening year after year, every year, and now you're reaching them.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's changed. Not an increase in loss, and I think it's just important to realize. You mentioned the elephant. Tell me, I actually have one of your elephants. My girls play with it. They've named it Ellie. We're not super creative.
I'm pretty sure we have an elephant named Ellie too.
Ellie,
yeah, but I want to hear about
Tell me about your
the things in the basket, especially that.
Yes. It's a sweet, cute little elephant.
Oh, absolutely. And I would just to touch on what you said about miscarriage too, and numbers. People have reached out and say, why do you get so excited that your numbers are growing? That's an awful thing. And what we try to tell people is, whether we're around or not, that number is always going to be there.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that your number is growing, the fact that our number is growing is a good thing, because that means we're touching more lives.
Exactly.
And these people are not going through this alone. And that's worth celebrating. So the elephant, when we first started, I wanted to make sure that there wasn't any kind of platform or anything, as far as who we are and what we do. I am a Christian, but I just didn't want it to be affiliated. People ask our stance on abortion. They ask our stance on, religion, and there's just no platform. Our mission is to give as many things to people that are in need, who have had, experienced pregnancy loss. So with that, I just came up with Forget Me Not baskets. So I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it was a basket. It's not even a basket anymore. Everything are in boxes and bags. We don't have a basket.
But Forget Me Not boxes is not the same
way.
Yeah.
No. So, and Forget Me Not was already taken. So we had to do Forget Me Not baskets, right? We all know how to get that EIN number.
Yeah.
Like, you have to come up with a name that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So included the hyphens. So, but with that, I just thought of elephants, and elephants always, are always known to never forget.
Mm-hmm.
But as we started researching more about elephants, they're just beautiful creatures that it's the matriarch that leads, the family whenever they migrate. And also anytime that they have a loss along their journey, even from years past, they will stop and kind of have a moment of silence. And they're just creatures that have compassion, and they're also creatures that grieve. And so it's been beautiful to just kind of see all the things that have come up with elephants. We have people that go on to have other children that bring them home in elephant little outfits, people that have their rooms decorated in elephants. We had a derby car that had our logo on it. We have people that get our logo tattooed on them, or other elephant tattoos on them. So it's just been really cool. But we love our elephant. And our elephants, we have actually different elephants. We have our main elephant that goes in our late lost box. Then we have our sibling elephant. And then we have our main elephant, we call him Pope, after actually somebody that passed away who used to always give to our organization. He was just a lovely gentleman, and his last name was Pope. And so we named it after him. And then we have we call it Benny, is our little sibling elephant. And then we actually have a more substantial early lost box that we're giving out now. Because when you look at our late lost box and you look at our early lost bag, there's just such a difference in items. And so we're trying to be able to give more remembrance items to families. And so we have a little elephant in there that we named Emery.
Mm-hmm. And you said people sew them. Did I catch that?
So we order them in, but we have patches on each one of them, and one of them actually has a heart. But we have patches that say "Loved, Lost, Remembered" for the Emery and the Benny elephant. We have a little hugs patch that are they're all hand sewn on.
Oh, that's nice.
So, yes, everything in our baskets is really curated specifically for bereaved parents. So yes, you can get that elephant online, but you can't get it with those patches, and that's how a lot of the items in our baskets are.
What are some of we talked a little bit about the feedback to the hospitals and the parents affirming that, but can you tell us a little bit maybe about some of the stories you've heard or some of the participation? What's some of the feedback you've heard from women who've received your kits?
Sure. So the number one story that sticks out to me is when I was early on doing this, and I went out to the mailbox, and because of HIPAA, nobody knows who receives our stuff, just like you. And so it's like you get something in the mail and you're like, wait a second, what? And so I was so excited. I had a letter in the mail, and I opened it, and there was a mom had written, and her very first words were, "How dare you give me a consolation prize for having a dead baby?" And so I was standing in my yard, I'll never forget it. And I was like, oh my goodness. And she went on to say that she hated that box and everything that it stood for, right? Because it stood for loss, and she wanted nothing to do with it, no matter how hard the nurses tried to get her to go through the box. But somehow that stupid box, she said, made it home with her. And I guess it was a basket, at the time. And about 6 or 8 weeks later, she, as it was just like staring at her from across the room, she decided to go through it. And she smelled every smell. She read every word. And she was going through the books and the pages and noticing all the footprints that were in there that her nurses put through, knowing that eventually she would take the time to go through and cherish. And how she finally realized that, something that she hated so much that represented loss, now and forever will represent her baby, her child. And it's just such a memorable keepsake. And I tell that story often only because I needed to know and understand that first part, because that is her truth, to also understand. It's great when somebody says, "I love your box. I love the elephant. I love this or that." But man, as we're starting to learn more and more, we talk to people, they hate our boxes. They don't want anything to do with them, right? Because that represents that they no longer have a child.
Mm-hmm.
That made me think of couple stories. It made me think early on, Maria, when we were talking about what are we going to do and help women. I think we even said, like, give them something to throw across the room. If they throw our brochures in anger, at least we have given them something to throw across the room. And then we hope that eventually they'll go pick up that pile. I have forgotten about that sentiment. And eventually they'll go pick up the pile and read what they say.
Right.
And,
because in that moment when they're in the hospital, it's like, well, you can't take your baby home, but here's a basket. And you could see how they'd be like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't want the basket. I want my baby.
And, and we were just talking to another mom about how it's so easy in that moment for everyone and everything to be wrong. The doctor was wrong. The nurse was wrong. The hospital is dumb. Everything's dumb. Everything, because everything is sort of. Yeah, like it's like a little sphere of grief, right? So like everything is awful.
No, you feel like there's nowhere to put the, because there isn't a place to put the blame.
There's nowhere to put the blame. It's just awful. So, I love that you share that story and that it did sort of sit with her. I had forgotten that sentiment myself, that it's hard. It's hard to receive that,
right? And to be in that first moment to just to be excited. It's like, well, no, you can't be.
And it's amazing that she shared that with you.
Yeah, she was honest. Honest. Yeah,
think sort of in our line of work here, it's interesting because so many nonprofits are front facing, right? Like you're seeing the people you're touching and changing. You have a homeless shelter or a food service or. And like you said, because of HIPAA, we do a lot of direct service where women reach out, but even that has some, distance. It's an online request and we put it in the mail. But it is such an interesting, our vision is that no one suffers miscarriage alone. At the same time, we don't meet most of the people we serve, and we are just hoping that presence of something in the moment is better than nothing. And some people kind of want to suffer alone, and not even just suffer alone. I find that challenging too, right? That your loss is unique, your loss is special. That was a unique and infinitely valuable life. Because sometimes when people say, oh, miscarriage is common, I'm like, well, that doesn't make me any less sad that my baby's still gone. So I think that's important and good, that
to be aware of.
And that you've been able to wade into those spaces and take the criticism and the anger and give the nurses something to do and work through. And I'm glad that, I've heard other stories from, like the photography of stillbirth. There's families that don't want it and then are thankful later that they have. Grief is hard and messy.
Oh, yeah. And there's so many things that, just to speak true to like what you were saying about miscarriage. And of course, that's, mostly what you deal with, and it's, we encourage anybody that comes in our office, we encourage them that, when you get pregnant, you should tell your close family and friends the moment you do. Not that this is relatable, but it's kind of like we don't wait and tell somebody that we get a job. Like we tell them we got the interview for the job. It doesn't matter if you got the job like that. But because what happens then is then you're expected to suffer in silence alone. Or people don't even start their whole grief process at all because they don't want anybody to know, or they feel like it's their fault, or they're uncomfortable. They don't want to make anybody else uncomfortable. And it's like your close family and friends should know this, And so we really do encourage people, hey, the minute you get pregnant, you need to call your best girlfriend and your mama.
Yeah.
And share that with them.
And have those at least happy moments. I know we've talked a lot about how not telling people so in case you miscarry just doesn't make sense. Yeah. I ended up not telling people in case I miscarried. Then I miscarried, and now I'm telling everyone that I miscarried because I'm missing work, or like we've talked to, you lie, and so then I missed all the happy days, and that we don't allow our friends and family. And I think I have seen a huge change in that with social media. In 2014, when I got pregnant, it was still pretty strict. No one was telling Facebook until 12 to 14 weeks. And it was also this wave. Maybe I'm just old now. I was in my late 20s. And so there was clear social media etiquette / trends. Like you had to come up with a really cute way to announce your pregnancy on Facebook. Maybe the youngins do that still. Probably not on Facebook. I don't think that's where they are.
Right. Where they live. I don't think they are there.
Anyway, so, and I really have strong memories of I was like planning my pregnancy announcement on Facebook. Like that's a thing us elder millennials did. And I was waiting till 12 weeks and I don't remember what I was going to do, but I had a plan. I remember for my second pregnancy, and I do remember I ended up doing one for my third pregnancy. But I just remember like how painful those were, and then not sure if I could talk about my miscarriage on Facebook. I remember sort of turmoiling, which now that's funny. Like I've got a podcast, a blog, like
right, but it's like, would it be allowed, in social media to then share this lost story? Yeah.
Yeah. Right. I remember that being this huge, like, I don't know how to talk about this. And just talking about it was, and again, I think some of it's age, some of it's now, it's stamped on my forehead. It's my title. But, the first time I talked about it was at a Bible study testimony. And that was like step one. And I wrote it down and it felt better. And then I ended up doing some writing that was published, not far and wide, but on some serious, national outlets. And the response was, you're so brave for saying anything. And then at that point, the cat was out of the bag and we were off to the races, right? Like there was no putting it back. And my story was out there. But I have this really vivid memory of like being upstairs and like, this is such a millennial problem. Like, I want to tell Facebook. How do I tell Facebook? I don't know. Everyone else is doing their cute pregnancy announcements. And I think some of that has changed for the better. I don't think it's just my perspective that we do talk about pregnancy a little earlier now, and that this like hard 12 to 14 week rule and rite of passage, I hope is breaking down, and thanks to organizations like yours. And
and I would think, we've seen this with our organization, and probably you have too, that then if say someone were to receive one of your baskets, or who receive one of our kits, then if they hear of a friend, they're prepared to help them if something happens, right? And so then that sort of awareness and ready to share-ness spreads.
Yes, and it's crazy. People will show up to our bunco events, or we do like a bereavement brunch, and just different fundraisers or events that we have. And they look around and they know half the people in the room, and they didn't, and like they're like legit friends with these people and never knew that they had a miscarriage too. And if only they knew, that doesn't change the outcome, but it just changes that whole the journey and the processing of grief, and just the discussions. And because grief is, you got to process grief somehow, some way, and it's going to come out. And so it's much healthier to talk about it with others, right?
And to have people who have gone through something similar. And yeah.
As we wrap up here, can you please tell us and our listeners, if they're interested in becoming involved with your organization or receiving resources, how do they find you and what can they do?
Absolutely. So we're on social media platforms that we talked about. We just kind of stick to Facebook and Instagram. That's as far and wide as we go. But we also have a website. It's forgetmenotbaskets.com. There, you can go on there. You can learn how to have the option to sign up to volunteer if you're local. You can sponsor a basket. You can sponsor an early loss bag, a late loss bag, a dad's bag. Not only can you sponsor it, you can decide where it's going to be donated to. We have a list of hospitals there, so you get to determine where you want it to go, which is a really cool thing. We have lots of fundraisers. We have a huge event in Oroville every year called the Elephant Run. Last year we had 890 runners. We already have 720 signed up. So, and it's in July.
Wow.
It's a huge bereavement event. So many families come out. All the children's names are on their sleeve. We're actually doing a Father's Day event here at the Akron Rubber Ducks game. And the dads get to throw out the first pitch. All the babies' names are going to be featured at the game. But it's a way to kind of honor dads and do kind of that stuff. So we're really big into that. As far as real quick is what's happened is we have this basket that we started giving out, and now we have this location. And what's happening are people are coming back to us and saying, I need more support. What can you do? What can you do? So from that, we've started a support group. We have a private Facebook support group. So if you go to our Facebook page, you can be on our public page, but we actually have a private support group. So you can be a member of that. And that's just where people are a little bit more open, and share things that they don't want to share publicly. But also some people just read it, and some people comment, and then some people share. So, and then we have an in-person support group. We have Mother's Day events, Father's Day events, pregnancy loss events, bereavement brunches, fundraisers. So our website is probably our first line of attack to find all that information. And then if you're ever in Worcester, look us up, Google us, Forget Me Not. We're right downtown.
That's great.
Thank you, Sarah, for being on our podcast. But really, I mean it, for, paving the way as one of these early organizations, just doing the work. And I'm so glad that when you got to that point that it was either go big or go home, that you went big. So I want to encourage you.
I'll never forget sitting with you and your mom at Panera years and years ago, right?
Yes.
Before you started you had written some things, I think.
Yeah, we were really, really early on. So no, it's been organizations like yours that have helped ours along, and we just continue to love to work together and to build relationships and to get the work done and the word out. So we are so thankful for you and your work, and thank you for being a guest today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Thank you for listening to Hope Blooms, a podcast from the Early Pregnancy Loss Association.
To learn more about how we and you can support women suffering early pregnancy loss, visit our website at miscarriagecare.com or find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thank you for listening.